time to cut open the premium Vans from the Vans Vault collection to see how they compare to the regular Vans and see if they're worth the extra money. So I totally forgot to announce the winners of the clod wallets made from the NYX handmade boot. So I'll put the winners over here. And I'm gonna try to make 1 or 2 clod wallets from the parts that we tear apart of the Vans. So if you wanna win one of those, I'll put the information at some point in the video. So the Vans Vault, they are allegedly higher quality, and I think you can only buy them in store or like on the boutique websites. I don't think you can actually buy them on the Vans website. And they're similar to how the Converse has their Chuck 70s that are allegedly higher quality out of better materials. And we did a video comparing these two Chuck 70s to the regular Chucks if you want to watch that video. There's already a few differences that I noticed right off the bat, but before we get into those, let's talk about the stats on these shoes and just kind of go through what's the information on them. So starting with the Vans Vault, the brand is Vans, obviously. The model is the Vans Vault OG Skate High LX. And the color is navy. These are manufactured in Vietnam, and the price is $85. But because these are only sold on like boutique websites or in stores, you almost always have to pay for shipping. So I ended up paying like $105, I think, for these. And versus the regular Vans, the Skate Highs in black, they retail for $65 and they're also made in Vietnam. And most of the time you don't have to pay for shipping. So I think it's worth calculating that into the cost if you're considering these two, because you can almost always find free shipping for regular Vans. Now let's talk about the differences I noticed right off the bat before we even cut them in half. So the first thing I noticed was this binding tape around the outside goes up a little bit higher, kind of like what we saw in the Chuck 70s. And it's also a little bit shinier, and it looks like it's the same reinforced tape style that we saw in the Chuck 70s, where there's, if you look at the cross section, there's little fibers on the inside that give it a little extra strength and durability. And the next thing I noticed was the panels are slightly different. So if you look at the back panel, it's a lot smaller on this back stay compared to the regulars. And then where the laces go, it doesn't have that patch near your ball of your foot where the regulars do. Another thing I noticed was the Vaults have a leather liner, whereas the regulars just have, it's like a fake leather. And then continuing to work inwards, you see there's a little bit of a sock liner, a half sock liner on the inside here, and the regulars don't have that. The inside canvas is slightly different, and the outside canvas looks a little bit different. We'll kind of see if there really is a thickness difference between the two once we get it torn apart. And the last thing that I noticed was the tongue on the Vaults is a little bit wider. I'm not sure why they would do that, but it's, I don't know, maybe an inch wider all the way through. So those are the differences. Now let's start cutting it apart and see what the differences are in materials, starting with the tongue and the toe cap. So the tongue on the Vaults is structured basically exactly the same as the regulars. It's just slightly thinner in the leather. The leather is 1.4 millimeters versus 1.6 millimeters in the regular Vans. And the canvas is a little bit thinner, and it's not a typical canvas in the way that you usually see canvas. I'll add a little close up so you can see the difference. And it looks like it's kind of tearing a little bit from me pulling the 2 layers apart. So we'll look at that a little bit closer when we get it completely cut in half, but I'm a little concerned that canvas isn't as good as the regular canvas. And as for the quality of the Vaults leather, I believe it's the exact same as the regulars, just a different color. I was kind of hoping it would be a nubuck or like a flesh out leather. It's just suede leather from that split portion of the hide. There's no grain in it anywhere. And as you can see from this really close up picture of it, there's no grain in there. So now let's get to the heel portion and see what this counter is made out of and see if it's structured the same. Let's compare these two, starting with the inside and working our way out, starting with the liner. So the leather liner on the Vaults is really, really thin, but I'll take it over this plastic fake leather on the regular Vans any day. I hate this fake leather. It's like my biggest complaint with the Vans is I don't like the feel of that. Like if I'm wearing like shorter socks, I hate the way it rubs on my ankles. So even though the vaults have this terrible leather, I would still rather have a terrible leather than plastic. Then next, we've got the foam. So the foam, it's a different color. The vaults have kind of a bluish foam. The regulars have a gray foam, but I don't think there's really much of a quality difference in there. Next to the counter. So they both got a recycled rubber counter that have, and what they do is they put a lot of little fibers in it to give it the structural strength, because if you bend a rubber counter too much and didn't have those fibers in it, you would start to crack it. And that's why a lot of times in a cheaper pair of shoes with like a really cheap counter, if you smash it, it breaks the counter in half and you feel that in your heel. So not a huge difference between the two of them, but it looks like the vaults don't have as much filler in them and it's more rubber. So take that for what it's worth. But next, let's cut this insert in half, get that pulled out and see how it compares to the regulars. Got the insert slash insole torn out, and it's almost exactly the same as the regular Vans. Both of them have a layer of canvas and then a layer of foam, and then the air infused rubber with the Cosmo fiberboard on the bottom. And both of the insoles aren't meant to be removed. I don't think you're supposed to remove the insoles from Vans. Now let's cut the rest of it in half. Finally, some differences that I think actually matter. So if you look at the sole thickness, it's quite a bit thicker than the regular Vans, which is good to see, because I was starting to worry that these were a little overpriced or not as good even. So that's good to see. They're gonna last a little bit longer, and I'm hoping that having a thicker sole and a little bit more binding tape and a higher quality binding tape is gonna help prevent the problem I see in all the Vans I've ever owned, where this heel portion starts separating. And every single pair of Vans I've had, it always happens. So hopefully that solved it. Let me know what you guys, if you had the vaults, does that happen to your Vans? I'd be curious to know. But other than that, it's structured exactly the same. You've got the rubber midsole, I guess is what you'd call it. It's not quite as thick on the vaults compared to the regular ones. So next I'm gonna cut the upper off, get these parts separated so we can take some measurements on the thickness of the different materials. Now that we got the uppers torn apart, we can see that they're both basically the same, where it's a 2-ply canvas where they took 2 different layers of canvas and glued them together. But the vaults have a more coarse, maybe more durable canvas on the outside and this less durable canvas on the inside. Versus the regulars have a finer, maybe not as durable canvas on the outside, but a coarser canvas on the inside. So I thought that was kind of strange. Ideally, I'd like to see the coarser on the outside from the vaults and the coarser insides from the regulars combined. I think it would last longer and kind of beef up the shoe and give it that really heavy canvas feel. But other than that, they're basically the same. I don't think one's gonna be that much more durable than the other, and the leather's basically the same. So overall, what do I think of the 2 different shoes? Do I think the vaults are worth the extra money compared to the regulars? I think they are. I like that they have the reinforced binding tape, a thicker sole, and probably most important to me is I like that they have this leather lining on the inside, because I hate this fake leather on the inside of these ones. So to me, it's worth it, especially if you can find it for the free shipping. Because if you can find it for $80 shipped to your house, it's way worth the $20 extra just for this leather on the inside alone. And I think they're gonna last longer. I think they're a better shoe. Ideally, I'd like to see maybe some pour on in here, kind of like what we saw in the Chuck 70s, because these are really comfy, but that's getting a little nitpicky. I still think they're worth it. So let me know what you guys think. If you've owned both, let me know which one you preferred and how they lasted. And thanks for everything you guys do. See ya.